The mustachioed one led the mission to rescue the princess. The one in blue may wish to see the crown jewels. He's an avid ring collector. And he may suddenly curl up into a ball. Perfectly normal.
We didn't know how good we had it. Character rivalries have been around for a long time in fiction. There's a whole bunch of them out there that many love and some would consider iconic to pop culture entirely. Some of the likes can be Goku versus Vegeta, Scorpion versus Sub-Zero, Thor versus Loki. The list can go on, but there is one rivalry that stands out amongst the rest. One that would be unlike any other character rivalry out there, and would even be more involved in the real world than a mere two-character rivalry in one franchise like most. These two characters in fact come from two completely different series having nothing to do with one another. One had already been around for 5 years by this point, already making his mark in the landscape, becoming super popular and iconic, with the other just getting started. These two's rivalry, without a doubt, was and is one of the absolute definitive iconic rivalries in all of not just video games, but in entertainment as a whole. That being Mario versus Sonic.
Hey guy, you're the first serious gamer I've seen all morning. Check this out, brand new 16-bit Super Nintendo with Super Mario World. Wow!
Oh, what's this one?
Oh, this is a Sonic the Hedgehog from Sega Genesis. Hey, look at these radical colors, huh?
Wow, Sonic's fast too.
No, over here.
I like Genesis, and it costs a lot less.
Wait, kid, that game
I'll
there.
take Sonic and Genesis.
Always cool.
Better than Nintendo.
Way more games in the competition. If you're not playing these games, you're a giant loser.
As crazy as this may sound, considering the modern landscape of gaming as to what's popular, these two guys ruled the 90s gaming landscape. There were other great and iconic game characters from the 80s and 90s, but these two are what made people want to buy these consoles that ruled the early to mid 90s. One was for Sega, one was for Nintendo, and thus was born an iconic rivalry between not only the companies themselves, but their mascot characters too, and the people loved it. Never before at this point has anyone seen a character rivalry, let alone a mascot character rivalry, like these two. Throughout the early to mid 90s, everywhere in the gaming landscape was Nintendo versus Sega. Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Blast processing versus zero blast processing. Sega Genesis cheaper than Super Nintendo. Name dropping in commercials from not just one, but both sides. Each one pointing out the flaws from either company's product to make theirs look better. Like the Game Boy not having color, or the Sega Genesis only giving you one pack-in game when Nintendo gives you 4, chump. Yes, and how could I forget about hanging a plush of the direct competition in a noose in the American office? If it wasn't already obvious, the 90s were ruthless. It was constant back and forth between these two. Don't think that Nintendo stood there and took the beating either. They clapped back too with ads of their own against Sega. It was a long sentence, oh my gosh. With these two companies going at each other's throats constantly, it put these two mascot characters against each other. I mean, to be frank, that's why Sonic was created, a new mascot character that could rival Nintendo's Mario. And boy, it certainly worked. Now, just about everyone was debating and trying to decide who was better. Who are you gonna pick? The slow, lame-o Mario or the new, high-speed Sonic Blue Hedgehog? And that's not even me paraphrasing. That was said in actual ads. As you can probably tell, it was a crazy time. And it's one of the defining things that makes these two characters so iconic. Yes, they would already be iconic because of their game, with how fun and defining they'd be to platformers in the 90s, but it was this rivalry throughout this decade that would make them more famous, but not only that, it would end up making one of the greatest gaming rivalries of all time, with no one to top it, to the point where it's still unmatched to this very day, and is one of the biggest things of how people remember these two characters. But, like most trends, it didn't last very long. Now, don't get me wrong, it still went on for a good portion of the 90s, starting in 1991 with the launch of Sonic 1, all the way till about 1995 when Sega launched this thing. I mean, it had Nights and Dreams, so better than nothing, I suppose. But the fact is, once Nintendo launched the Nintendo 64 in 1996 on June 23rd, interesting, with the launch of Mario 64 alongside it, with this title ending up being the game to define what 3D gaming would be entirely, not to mention the super success it came with. I'm funny, right, guys? Alongside it being a very well-made game that would become yet another iconic gaming classic, back in the 90s, this was the console seller for many for the N64. If it wasn't obvious, Nintendo was starting to leave Sega in the dust. A number of other things contributed to this as well. There was the rise of the Sony PlayStation being the new direct competition to Nintendo with how successful it was becoming, as well as Sonic having no new mainline game on the Sega Saturn. This is where some say Sonic's popularity started to go downhill fast. Therefore, Sega and Sonic no longer being a big threat to Nintendo anymore since they were dealing with Sony. But at the same time, by the time consoles and companies were entering 3D in the mid-90s, it's not ridiculous to say that these two were starting to be less competitive and were doing their own thing. Sega and Nintendo didn't take shots at each other much anymore like they used to. They were still partially there, but they weren't direct shots with Mario and Sonic. The only people who really put Mario and Sonic against each other were likely the players themselves, and this likely continued all the way to the 2000s, where the Sega and Nintendo company rivalry was really laid to rest officially because once the Dreamcast failed and Sega left the console making business, thus going third party, they had to stop taking shots directly at Nintendo altogether so they could work with them in some way to get their games on their consoles. But just because the companies were now working together, that doesn't mean that people didn't stop putting these two against each other still in this new decade. The 2000s was a fun time for gaming. 3D was in full effect, graphics were getting way better, for the time at least. Portables were reaching their peak here with iconic titles released this decade. Of course as well, beloved franchise of the 80s and 90s were now fully evolved into the next generation here in the 6th generation of gaming, with their gameplay having a new take on it from the 2D era they started in. And you know who else that can be said to? These two characters right here. By this point, Sonic and Mario have had a number of games in this generation. Games that defined these characters well in 3D. Sonic had his magnum opus by this point being Sonic Adventure 2, and Mario had Super Mario Sunshine. Regardless how you feel about this game, both of them were getting a great number of games for their series. But what about their rivalry? As mentioned earlier, didn't these two also go head-to-head against each other in this decade too? Well, to some they might say yes, but I think the answer here is yes and no. Let me explain it. In terms of yes, fans at the time likely paired the two against each other to argue who was better for the sake of arguing. But if you didn't already know, in the early 2000s when Sonic went multi-platform, not only was Sonic on PlayStation and Xbox starting in 2004, but in 2002, Sonic the Hedgehog premiered multi-platform on the Nintendo GameCube and Game Boy Advance. In the early 2000s, as the releases came, more and more Sonic titles would appear on Nintendo consoles. Some, as a matter of fact, would be exclusive to Nintendo only. And in terms of the companies, Nintendo and Sega would actually end up working together on an F-Zero game for the GameCube. Slowly, it seemed like something was changing between the two. 10 years prior, these two companies couldn't stand each other. Now they're making a whole game together and putting their main mascot on their once biggest company rivals' consoles. Something was changing with Nintendo and Sega. With Sega going third party, it seems like the two was more willing to work together, and possibly it seemed they were willing to put the past behind them and start a new chapter for the both of them. That being the case, there was only one thing to do. How do you do that with a legacy like this? And having your characters that people put together often, how are you going to start a brand new chapter for yourselves? Well, coincidentally around this time, Sega had acquired the license to make an Olympic sport game for consoles based on the upcoming Summer Olympic Games being hosted in Beijing in the year 2008. But there was a roadblock. The International Olympic Committee put out their intention of wanting to make this game marketable to a younger audience, simply to make the Olympics seem more interesting to children. Therefore, Sega had to decide on how to make the game fun, sellable, and of course, appeal to a younger audience. And after one great idea and a phone call to a new friend, plans began a discussion about something that would impact gaming like never before. And in 2007, everything would change officially forever, for not only the companies involved, but for two characters as well. And just like that, history was made. Everything for these two characters had changed forever. We have come a long way from the 90s. Before we were fighting about who was better, but now with a brand new game made not only as a way to advertise the Olympics to a new generation, but for these characters, it was the beginning of a new era, with a friendship being created, the past was left behind, and a new future had begun for the both of them. With this brand new, very successful spin-off series introduced in 2007 and would have a great number of titles released afterwards, the rivalry has officially ended. So now, let the Olympic Games begin. And Beijing wouldn't be their only stop.
Mario and Sonic at the London 2014 Olympic Games.
Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games is a title that would go from a weird concept to some upon seeing the reveal trailer to being one of the greatest spin-off game series ever made. Not just out of pure success the series saw, but being that with this series, the rivalry of Mario and Sonic was officially over. And now, these two are best buddies competing in the Olympics. If you want to get technical, you could say the rivalry ended in 2002 in the GameCube era, but that wasn't really officially the ending of the rivalry. It was more of like an agreement on one side. But here is where we see Mario and Sonic develop a friendship, and instead of rivals having to put up with each other, they are now pals having fun at the Olympics with all of their friends from their series. To say that people were simply fascinated by this is an understatement. When this series first started in 2007, people lost their minds. I mean, how could you blame them? This idea is so cool, seeing all these characters many people know and love from either series all together competing against each other or just being on the same screen is so cool as a concept, and it works so well in execution. The fact that so many shots like these exist is so awesome to me. Dang, man, it's so cool. Whether in summer sports to winter sports, they did just about all of them. This goes without saying, but if you didn't know, you may have noticed I call this a series, not just one game. That's right, they didn't stop with the first one. After the first game was a huge success in 2007, Nintendo and Sega every 2 years would team up for Mario and Sonic to compete in the Olympic Games to follow. From Vancouver, London, Sochi, Rio, Tokyo, they kept coming back to the Olympics again and again, each time better than the last, with more games, more characters, and more fun things to do. 3 games on the Wii, 2 on the Wii U, and 1 Switch game, as well as 4 handheld versions of the games as well. Each of these titles are awesome in their own unique way and are all such a fun time. Jam-packed with so many Olympic sports to play in each one, most of them using the Wii's gimmicks to the fullest, especially the first one. It still makes my arm hurt to this day. Boy, I sure had one rough day at work today, but hopefully now I can get some time to relax with one of my favorite games ever made, being Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games. Oh, I'm feeling it now, boy! Coming alongside these fun events, you get to play as each of your favorite characters from the series you love. With each installment, new characters join the roster from both series, and an even amount too. One more thing to mention from these titles is that with the regular Olympic sports to play, you also get the iconic Dream events where you play an identical version of the said sport in Mario or Sonic's world. But instead of being a texture swap, they end up actually changing things entirely for the Dream event to make it wacky because it's from these characters' world, and many of these Dream events would be so well loved and memorable throughout the series. It would in fact be thanks to these Dream events that I would find previous Sonic game locations within these Dream events, like Radical Highway from SA2, Windy Valley from SA1. The Dream events are such a cool implementation that got better with each one. Oh, of course, the games had unique modes to play as well, like Winter Games Tourney, London's London Party, Sochi Showdown, and plenty more. Even the DS Winter Games title had a whole story mode where Mario and Sonic team up to fight Eggman and Bowser. My gosh, this is official? If you can't tell by my rambling, these titles are packed with tons of content and a lot of fun. With the multiple titles released for the series, the amount of passion and love put into these games is big with each one. It not only feels like our favorite characters coming together to play some sports, but a celebration of a new era for these characters, and the Olympics is how this rivalry was ended. Now, what more to do besides have fun and make some memories? The mere idea of this is so genius. The fact that at one point, every 2 years, these two iconic characters would take time off from their regular main adventures, or kart racing, or some other kind of spin-off, or whatever else they were doing. They would take time off from their adventures, make ways with their enemies and rivals, to team up every 2 years to compete at the Olympic Games. I just don't think we know how much we took this for granted, guys. I can't even lie. Of course, by we, I mean me, because I was way too harsh on this back then. Because, you see, there's Sonic, and it's not like London or something. It's like Mario, Sonic. It don't even say the name of the title. What a stupid joke this is. Where am I going with this? Going back to the Wii era though, even though I love the games that came later as well, like Sochi, Rio, and even Tokyo, with Rio being my favorite of these three, the first three on the Wii is where I feel it shined the most, with the first one introducing us to this new friendship, the Olympic winter one giving us more of a look at Mario and Sonic being closer friends here, but when we get to London, by now we already have a sense of familiarity. And these two truly have gone from rivals to best friends. Their new crossover series officially killed their rivalry, and there was no turning back now. With the third one, it doesn't feel just like a celebration of the characters anymore. It feels like a celebration of this crossover entirely. The crossover that managed to destroy their rivalry. And you can feel it from the opening, the score, everything about London really shines as a really great big celebration to this crossover series entirely. Not to say that the ones that would come afterwards were bad or anything, but with London, you feel something with this title that the other ones can't really give entirely. This might be nostalgia talking because I played London the most as a kid, but what I'm trying to get at is, with this singular dab on the London clock tower, no more fighting, no more arguing of who is better, no more company rivalry. From now on, we're in a new era of Mario and Sonic, gaming's former rivals to iconic duo.
Hey, we should do this again sometime.
Oh yeah, next time.
You know, it's certainly crazy talking about this. These two characters have certainly been through a lot over the years, starting out as rivals who couldn't stand each other, then becoming tolerable towards each other, to now becoming one of gaming's most iconic duos you could ever see. The turnaround for these characters is really crazy to think about, honestly. You don't see this often with a lot of rivalries between characters, mostly because they take place within the same franchise as those two characters. But here, it's two mascot characters from two completely different companies that once gone head to head, to now, there's a complete 180 to where now, you could say they're best of friends. No other set of characters can do this like they did. No one else will or ever be as iconic as these two. The fact that they are even still around to this day and going stronger than ever before with their widespread appeal is immaculate. And I love seeing this for both these characters because both of them have always been somewhat special to me ever since I was a kid. Both of these characters were characters I loved dearly. Whether it was Mario or Sonic, I loved them both so much. Even though Sonic may have had a little bit more of an upper hand than Mario, I still loved these characters so much as a kid. And thanks to this Olympic Games series, this legendary crossover from Nintendo and Sega changed everything and would ultimately end up ending one of the greatest gaming rivalries of all time, and then making one of the best friendships in all of gaming that there ever has been. Because Mario and Sonic are two names that are iconic. And I'm really trying to sell this point.